This video is sponsored by War Thunder. On April 6, 1945, the heaviest and most powerful battleship ever built set sail from Yamaguchi Prefecture in Japan on a mission that all on board knew would be won. The massive ship was Yamato, a vessel unmatched in size, firepower, and armor. Her mission was to reach Okinawa, where the United States Army and Marines had just landed. The island was the final defensive barrier before the Allies could strike at mainland Japan. And the Imperial Army and Navy, drained of manpower and resources after years of exhausting war, could not adequately resist the Allied assault. As a result, Yamato and her crew were ordered to support the resistance. Even though it was clear to everyone involved that this meant almost certain death, Yamato was fully loaded with ammunition, enough to fight a decisive battle. But she carried only the minimum amount of fuel needed to reach her destination. There would be no return journey. The servicemen aboard understood their fate long before they left port, but they also believed that their sacrifice was necessary. Operation Tengo, as the mission was called, was the last desperate attempt for Japan to slow or halt the Allied advance. The idea was that Yamato, with her enormous guns and heavily armored hull, could deal significant damage to enemy naval forces before being sunk. For the crew, the thought of perishing in combat was accepted as part of their duty. To them, dying in battle for the glory of Emperor Hirohito and the honor of the Empire of Japan was the highest calling. They sailed with resolve, knowing that their deaths were inevitable, but believing that their sacrifice might give their nation a chance, however small, to fight back against an overwhelming enemy force. Even though Yamato's voyage in April 1945 ended in tragedy, her legacy lives on in history, and her past battles can be relived in War Thunder, the most comprehensive online military vehicle combat game ever created. In War Thunder, players can recreate epic clashes at sea, on land, and in the air, reshaping history with their own skill and strategy. By following the link in the description, you can access this free-to-play game on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. The game offers access to over 2,000 historically accurate tanks, aircraft, helicopters, and warships. Each vehicle is crafted with painstaking attention to detail, modeled down to individual components, reflecting more than a century of technological development from the 1920s to the modern day. The sense of immersion is immediate, with intuitive controls that make learning accessible yet allow mastery through skill. The developers have poured immense effort into historical accuracy, ensuring that every vehicle feels and functions like its real-life counterpart. Players can fight in battles across more than 100 battlefields, each designed to recreate different terrains and theaters of war. Ground, air, and naval forces clash together in massive engagements, offering endless opportunities for strategy and excitement. The game also features realistic modes that allow players to test their tactical abilities, making it more than just a game but a genuine combat simulator. The Dark Documentaries team has been particularly struck by the level of detail in the aircraft and warship models, which pay tribute to the real machines and the men who operated them. War Thunder's blend of immersive gameplay, stunning graphics, and historical authenticity makes it unique among military games. For new players, there is also an exclusive offer, a 7-day account boost and access to a premium tank, aircraft, and warship, giving them a head start in their campaigns. For anyone fascinated by history or strategy, War Thunder offers an unparalleled experience where the past can be lived and reshaped to understand Yamato and the thinking that led to her creation. One must look back to the roots of Japan's naval strategy. The turning point came in May 1905, during the Russo-Japanese War, when Japan defeated the Russian fleet at the Battle of Tsushima Strait. This victory solidified Japan's reputation as a rising naval power, and shaped the doctrine that guided its navy for decades. Japanese naval officers became convinced that future wars at sea would culminate in colossal battles where entire fleets would engage in one decisive clash to determine the outcome. This doctrine, known as Kantai Kessen, or decisive battle doctrine, became the guiding principle of Japan's naval planning. The idea was to build ships so powerful and so formidable that they could tip the scales in a single engagement, securing victory for the Empire in one climactic battle. The arrival of the British dreadnought in 1906 reinforced this thinking, as it revolutionized naval warfare by focusing on heavily armored battleships capable of dominating the seas. Inspired by this innovation, Japan pursued its own dreadnoughts, culminating in the launch of the Nagato in 1916, a massive warship armed with 10 16-inch guns, making her among the largest and most powerful ships of her time. For a moment, Japan seemed to be on a path to matching the world's great naval powers. However, Japan's ambitions were checked by international agreements that sought to limit an arms race at sea. After World War I, the Treaty of Versailles and the Washington Naval Treaty restricted Japan's ability to build capital ships. Japan petitioned to be recognized as an equal power to the United States and the European victors, but their request was denied. The treaties imposed limits that capped Japan's fleet at 70% of the size of the US Navy. To Japan, this was seen as a humiliating insult and an unfair restriction on its sovereignty. The sense of betrayal and resentment grew, and by 1934, Japan withdrew from the League of Nations and renounced the Washington Naval Treaty. With those obligations removed, the Imperial Japanese Navy was free to pursue its vision once again. It embarked on a secret program to build 4 super battleships, vessels unlike anything the world had seen before. Japan's leaders knew they could never outproduce the United States, whose vast industrial capacity was unmatched. But they believed that, by building ships of unprecedented power, they could offset this disadvantage. These super battleships were envisioned as leviathans of the sea, armed with colossal main guns, wrapped in armor thick enough to withstand even the heaviest naval artillery, and capable of fighting multiple enemy vessels at once. The idea was simple but bold. If Japan could not match the United States ship for ship, it would instead build ships so superior that they could dominate any engagement. From this ambition came Yamato. After studying more than 24 designs, Japanese engineers and naval planners finalized a plan for a ship armed with 9 18-inch main guns, the largest naval artillery ever mounted on a warship. Her armor would be thick enough to withstand shells of the same caliber fired by an enemy, and she would be protected underwater against torpedoes weighing up to 660 pounds. Such a vessel would require an enormous displacement of at least 70,000 tons, far greater than any ship before her. In 1936, construction was approved for Yamato and her sister ship, Musashi, but before they could be built, the dockyards at Kurai and Nagasaki had to be modified. Their slipways were enlarged, new cranes capable of lifting 300 tons were installed, and elaborate measures were taken to conceal the work. The dockyards were covered and shielded from view to prevent U.S. naval intelligence from discovering what was underway. The secrecy was so strict that even many within Japan's own government were unaware of the projects. True scope. By early 1939, both Yamato and Musashi were well into construction, and a third hull, Shinano, was planned. Shinano was eventually converted into an aircraft carrier, as Japan recognized the growing importance of naval aviation. On August 8, 1940, Yamato was launched, and she immediately claimed the title of the largest battleship in the world. Heavier and more powerful than even the German battleship Bismarck, Yamato represented the peak of battleship design. She measured 862 feet in length, had a draft of 36 feet, and a beam of 127 feet, displacing over 72,000 tons. Her presence was meant to embody Japan's naval doctrine and to serve as the ultimate weapon in the decisive battle that Japanese strategists believed was inevitable. Yamato's very existence symbolized the pride, ambition, and desperation of an empire determined to carve its place in history. Even as the tides of war began to turn against it, the colossal battleship was a marvel of engineering and the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy. Powered by 12 compound boilers and 4 shaft-geared steam turbines that generated over 150,000 horsepower, enough to propel the massive vessel to speeds of 27.5 knots. Her range was estimated at more than 7,100 miles, which was remarkable for a ship of her displacement and size. Almost one-third of her entire weight consisted of armor alone, making her one of the most heavily protected warships ever constructed. Her central armor belt was an impressive 16 inches thick. The citadel was 14 inches, the lower armor belt varied between 11 and 8 inches, and the deck armor ranged from 7 to 9 inches. Her 3 enormous main gun turrets were defended with frontal armor of over 26 inches, while the conning tower was encased in nearly 20 inches of steel. These staggering defensive measures made Yamato practically invulnerable to most naval gunfire of the time, and even aerial attacks would require immense concentrated firepower to penetrate her layers of protection. Her offensive capability was even more astonishing. The main battery consisted of 9 18-inch naval guns, the largest caliber guns ever mounted on a warship, each one longer than 69 feet and weighing more than 162 tons. These colossal weapons could fire shells weighing around 3,129 pounds, traveling at 2,600 feet per second, with a range of nearly 26 miles. Despite their immense size, the guns had a firing rate of slightly over 1 round per minute, and each salvo was capable of devastating anything within its reach. Complementing this main armament were 12 6.1-inch guns mounted in 4 triple turrets, an additional 12 5-inch guns, as well as dozens of 25mm anti-aircraft cannons and for 13.2mm machine guns designed to ward off hostile aircraft. In addition to her weapons, Yamato carried 7 reconnaissance floatplanes, typically Nakajima E-8NS or E-4NS, which could be launched from 2 catapults for scouting missions, extending the battleship's eyes far beyond the horizon. Operating such a massive ship required a crew of more than 3,200 men, a floating city at sea that demanded constant discipline, coordination, and skill to maintain the ship at combat readiness. Yamato completed her sea trials in November 1941, and only a few months later, in February, she became the flagship of Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of the combined fleet. Despite her imposing size and unmatched firepower, Yamato's role in the early years of the war was relatively passive. At the Battle of Midway in June 1942, one of the pivotal clashes of the Pacific War, Yamato did not fire a single round in combat, instead serving as the fleet's headquarters while American carrier-based aircraft inflicted catastrophic losses on the Japanese carriers. For nearly 2 years afterward, the ship's presence was more symbolic than practical, a deterrent meant to embody Japan's naval strength. It wasn't until mid-1944, during the American advance toward the Philippines, that Yamato finally joined her sister ship, Musashi, in an attempt to halt the overwhelming momentum of the U.S. Navy. At Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history, the Japanese sought to lure the Americans into a decisive engagement that would cripple their fleet. But the plan quickly unraveled. Japanese forces were ambushed by American submarines, and waves of carrier-based aircraft swarmed over the fleet with relentless attacks. Musashi Yamato's sister ship endured dozens of torpedo and bomb strikes before sinking beneath the waves, taking over 1,000 sailors with her. Yamato herself was struck by 3 bombs, causing moderate damage, but she survived. Admiral Takeo Kurita, who commanded the task force, ultimately made the fateful decision to retreat, reasoning that to lose Yamato as well would be a pointless sacrifice. Despite firing her guns multiple times during the battle, Yamato failed to land any decisive hits on enemy ships, and her reputation as the ultimate battleship remained untested in real combat. After the bruising encounter at Leyte, Yamato withdrew to Korea, where she remained under repair from November 1944 until April 1945. By this time, the war had turned decisively against Japan. The Americans had launched the invasion of Okinawa, and Japanese leaders in both the Navy and government realized the war was nearing its end. Yet the ethos of Bushido and the warrior spirit persisted. The Japanese High Command determined that the Navy must fight to the very last, even if it meant annihilation. A desperate plan was drawn up, Operation Tinga. This operation called for Yamato, along with other ships of the Second Fleet, to set sail on a one-way mission toward Okinawa. The strategy was stark in its simplicity. Yamato would steam directly into the massive American fleet off Okinawa, beach herself if necessary, and serve as an immovable fortress, fighting until every man on board was dead. It was a mission designed not for victory, but for honor. To demonstrate Japan's unyielding resolve in the face of certain defeat. The crew knew what awaited them. There would be no return journey, no chance of survival. Yet they carried out their duties with grim determination. On April 6, 1945, Yamato set sail from Japan with her escorts, prepared to sacrifice themselves for their emperor and their nation. The task force never reached Okinawa. On April 7, only a day after departing, the fleet was detected by American submarines and aircraft. The United States Navy, with overwhelming superiority in both numbers and technology, moved quickly to intercept. Wave after wave of American planes descended on Yamato and her escorts. Japanese destroyers and cruisers were picked off one by one, succumbing to torpedoes and bombs. With her escorts gone, Yamato became the main target. Her enormous anti-aircraft batteries filled the skies with fire, but the sheer number of attacking planes was too much. Pilots attacked from every direction, dropping armor-piercing and high-explosive bombs while torpedoes slammed into her hull. For 2 grueling hours, Yamato endured hit after hit. Her gunners fighting until the barrels glowed red-hot, many silenced only when their crews were killed at their posts. Fires raged uncontrollably across her deck, and the list to port grew more severe as torpedoes tore open her sides. Once her anti-aircraft defenses were silenced, the attacks became even more merciless, with planes swooping in at low altitude to drop their ordnance with deadly precision. After at least 11 torpedo strikes and numerous bomb hits, the order was finally given to abandon ship. Chaos and tragedy unfolded as sailors struggled to escape the burning giant. Minutes later, Yamato capsized and exploded in a cataclysmic blast that sent shockwaves across the sea. Her vast ammunition stores igniting in a single fiery eruption. Of the more than 3,200 men who sailed on her final mission, fewer than 300 survived. The rest went down with the ship. Martyrs of a doomed empire's last desperate stand. Yet the story of Yamato did not end beneath the waves. Nearly a century later, her legacy endures as a symbol of both pride and tragedy. In Japan, the Yamato Museum at Kure, the very place where she was built, houses an extraordinary 1/10 scale model of the battleship, a meticulous recreation that allows visitors to grasp her immense size and the ambition behind her construction. Yamato has become a cultural icon, representing not only Japan's wartime aspirations but also the futility of resistance against overwhelming power. Her story remains one of awe, sacrifice, and ultimate loss. A reminder of the human cost of war and the towering machines built in its service. Thank you for watching, and thanks to War Thunder for sponsoring. **